Hi everyone, I'm KLMeri.
And I'm Soda.
We are back with another Space Trio podcast. Today we're going to share with you our top choices for most alien aliens. We've each picked our top 5 most alien aliens from TOS, and then we'll also share with you our top 3 most alien aliens from the animated series. So, how did you pick your most alien Soda?
So I went by a few parameters. Like, firstly, obviously, the look. If they look weird, they are very alien. But I also had to preface this with, just because they look weird doesn't mean they are the most alien. They also have to have a unique behavior, a unique culture to them that makes them more alien than human. Like, an alien that looks very, very weird but acts just like a human is not very interesting, in my opinion.
Makes sense.
Yeah. What did you rank them by?
Well, when I started thinking about the subject, I immediately thought I'm going to eliminate any very humanoid like versions of human beings from Earth.
Yeah, makes sense.
If I have an exception to that, let's say if they're bipedal, it's because I found that they have something, as you said, some special characteristic or trait or part, just who they are, that really makes them alien compared to um, other humanoid type species. So my focus was really on something that didn't look like, talk like, and walk like a human
Yeah.
being.
Yeah. Let's just say that I'm guessing most of the aliens from the original series are out because of this criteria.
Quite a lot of them, yes.
Yeah, I mean, how many times did the crew come to like a planet that looks just like Earth with people that look just like humans, but their culture is somehow different for some reason?
That's exactly right. So I didn't want to include those simply because I felt some of those humanoid races were too much like Earth beings in a different stage, or with a having made like a different choice in their
Exactly.
culture that means that they have a different path, if you will, in how they evolve. But at the same time, they're still very human like. So to me, that was a different version
Mhm.
of a Turian. And so I didn't want to include those because they're just not alien enough for me.
Exactly. I feel the same way, and that's why also it was like aliens that look weird but behave just like humans because they're also not very interesting. I mean, this one is more common, I think, in the animated series where they had the ability to make them look weirder. But even in the original series, you had like, for example, in Journey to Babel, you had like um, the Andorians that they were blue and had antennas, but they were essentially kind of human-like in their behavior, right?
Very much so. They
Yeah,
essentially did take quite a number of, I'll say, animal species and sort of make them humanoid, but then make them act just like humans.
exactly.
So there's quite a number of well-known, I'll say, Federation races that I think, are eliminated from my choices.
Yeah, I think I know which one.
Well, let's get started. Give me your number 5, Soda.
My number five. Okay, my number five is kind of an outlier in that they kind of appear human, but also kind of don't. And I'm talking about the nameless species of Trelane and his parents from the Squire of Gothos.
Ooh,
Yeah, I'm just fascinated by these species because Trelane appears human, but I think it's kind of clear by the end of the episode that this is not his real appearance. We don't know what he looks like actually. We don't know if we can even perceive him actually as a person. Um, he is just an infant of his species, apparently, especially by the appearance of I guess, his parents at the end of the episode. But he is incredibly powerful, and his parents are apparently even more powerful. And he just toys with humans, like like the they're like his dolls, basically. He can create anything he wants. He can make the atmosphere breathable and unbreathable to humans. He's just fascinating to me.
I really like your choice. I mean, Trelane was on my list. To
Hmm.
be honest, I sort of grouped him into what I call the super powerful, unknown beings of the galaxy.
Yeah, but you see, I actually thought about them, but I think Trulane is kind of an outlier in that most of the super powerful beings that the Enterprise encounters either don't want, mostly don't want to intervene with it either because they think they're too superior to intervene with humans, or they think they're like, not worth the time. Basically, they're unimportant, or like say I forgot the name of the species from the first episode of the Klingons. Um,
The Organians.
the Organians, exactly. Like the
Yes.
Organians, they're like this benevolent, we are superior, and one day you will come, you will reach our level, but not today. So please go away, something like that.
Yeah, I kind of put the Organians and Trelane together, and to me, I call them like the Q group.
Yeah,
Especially Trelane, like you said, has a tendency to want to play with subpar species.
exactly. That's why I like him because he's the only like superior being with like, yeah, these humans are kind of funny. I want to see what's up with them.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's a good choice. So my number 5 is a little strange. It's actually Sylvia and Karab from Cat's Paw
Yeah.
because they're not as they seem to be. In fact, they are something called a orthanid species. I don't know that that was stated specifically in Cat's Paw, but I think in Deep Space Nine they might actually give a name to the species of what they were. But in the original series, at the very end of the episode, you see the actual forms of Sylvia and Karab. And
Yeah.
they are basically these tiny little creatures. They're very fragile creatures, and but they have extensive mental abilities from what we can see, and they use something called a transmuter to essentially project images of themselves and their surroundings basically on this desolate type planet in order to fool Kirk and his crew. But their real goal is, they're explorers. They actually come from another galaxy outside of the Milky Way, and they've come to study some of the species in the Milky Way galaxy. And of course, they ended up studying a period of Earth history that was quite medieval.
Yeah.
And therefore, they recreate that with their transmuter, and then proceed to treat Kirk and Spock and McCoy like basically kind of like a little bit like lab rats. They like to play with them and observe what they're doing, and and then of course Sylvia has a bit of a power trip going on there.
Yeah.
I just find them very alien because what they appear to be is not what they are. And in fact, the fact that they can be so tiny and look so strange and yet develop some type of technology that essentially showcases that they are as smart as, if not smarter than, most of the humanoid species in the Federation. So,
Yeah, I really like the design of them that we see at the end of the episode. Like that's very, first of all, it's very original, but it's also kind of creepy and unsettling and very alien.
hmm and I don't know how often we see species that are so tiny.
Yeah, that's also true. That's also true. They are very. Well, we don't see them to scale, like we don't see them next to the crew, but they do appear to be like pretty small. It's their design. It's very weird. They're like these puffy blue things with like a scorpion tail and
A shrimp face, a shrimp tail face. I don't know. It's very
yeah,
odd.
it's
hmm
very odd, very creative too. They are not on my list only because like I said, the appearance alone is not what wasn't my only criteria. I felt that we
Mm-hmm.
kind of played this type of alien too much, I guess. Like we had those the other aliens that took a humanoid form with a rose smell. So what's the name of the
Yeah, believe it or not, I had a category called illusions. And in them I had I had Trelane and I had the Organians, and then I had aliens like the Telosians. It was those species that use some sort of mental ability or technology to create an illusion to deceive or disguise who they are. And of that category, basically Sylvia and Karab were my pick.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I can see why, and I think we did the same thing in that we both put our choices at the fifth spot because
Mm-hmm.
they spent so much of the episode looking like a human, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So what's your number 4?
My number four. My number four is the Tholian from
Ooh.
the Tholian web. Yeah. Like I said, if I had to rank these by like my favorites, the Tholians would be ranked much higher just because I kind of like them and I keep wondering about them. They keep being mentioned all throughout the franchise. Like I think they are mentioned in Deep Space Nine. I think they're also mentioned in the Next Generation and possibly even Voyager. But they're just interesting. They're just an interesting group. They aren't humanoids, that's for sure. They kind of look like birds, but also kind of don't. We don't really know that much about their culture, except they're extremely xenophobic and also kind of don't want to share their culture. So I guess it makes sense. And in the episode we see them in the original series, they kind of have a very cool defense technique of like creating a sort of pressure web around their enemies, basically.
Yeah, they're definitely one of a kind. Um, like you said, their defense or offense tactics are unlike any of the others that we see. Um,
Exactly.
it, I don't think we get a really good description of what they actually look like.
We do see like a picture of them, like when they talk to the Enterprise in the episode. But
Yeah, it's
it,
very.
yeah, it's unclear. It's
It's
very
unclear.
unclear.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's almost. I almost got the feeling like when they were on the view screen, we were only seeing sort of like what our eyes could interpret of who they really
exactly,
are.
exactly. That's the exact feeling I got because I'm not sure they're even corporeal beings.
Yeah,
They may not even be that. They are
yeah.
they're very intriguing. That's why I picked them.
They Tholians were actually in my non-corporeal, non-corporal category. So I talked a little bit about how I had like an illusion category.
Hmm.
So those that really sort of mask who they are. But then I had a category of aliens that we don't quite know what they look like, and we're not even sure if they're a physical, have a physical body.
Yeah.
Um, and the Tholians were definitely in that category. But my number 4 is also from that category and is actually the one that kind of beat out the Tholians, and that's the Medusans.
Mm, yeah. That's my number one.
Oh, that's awesome. um, I'll just talk a little bit about it.
Yeah,
So the Medusan, we first see the Medusans in Is There No Truth and Beauty? And basically, there is an ambassador who's come aboard the Enterprise. The thing about the Medusans is they are definitely non corporal, but they're very highly intelligent. I think they're described as telepathic and empathetic. So, a race of telepaths and empaths. The only problem is that their physical appearance is complete opposite. So, they're so ugly, they can drive a person mad. Just by someone can go insane just from looking at them.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd call this ugliness. I know that's what the episode called it, but
Yeah.
I think it's more like, their appearance is probably so like outside of our perception that it's
Right.
probably hard. Yeah.
Right, that's what I was going to say. So I really take that term ugly loosely. What it means is that when someone, a more humanoid species like Turians or Vulcans, look upon this race of beings, and they have to look through a visor, can't look with the naked eye, but when they attempt to, whatever it is that they're perceiving is so strong that it essentially impacts their brainwave pattern.
Yeah.
So it drives them to a type of madness, or just it scrambles their brain, I guess you would say. So that translates in the episode, like you said, to ugliness. But I think they just use that comparison because, again, they do call them Medusans, so it harkens back to the to the Greek mythology of Medusa, whose gaze basically would turn somebody to stone, so no one could look at Medusa directly without taking that risk. So it's a similar situation here with the Medusan ambassador. And the other thing that really struck me is Alien, and I think kind of drove home that this being just or this race does not have physical form, is because he's essentially brought on board in a box.
Yeah.
Which of course is also to protect the crew from having to even look at this being directly. So, it's for safety precaution. But I also sort of get the impression, well, you fit in a box. So I guess your energy matter fits in a box. So you're very alien.
Yeah. Also, whenever they opened the box, there was just a lot of light. Just light.
Right. Which reminded me of the Tholians soda, because there's definitely some light play going on that view screen when we looked at the Tholians.
Exactly. I also, one thing and another thing I liked about Tholians, which is why I put them at my number one spot, is not just that it's not just they're not corporeal and they are telepathic and aren't humanoid in the least. It's also that they have like an extra sense that humans don't have, which I also like. They have this space direction sense.
Yes.
Which I think is very clever because, oftentimes we see different aliens and maybe some of them are empathic or telepathic, but they all have like, the same basic senses of touch, smell, sight, and so on. So it's kind of clever to have an alien who may not be able to touch or hear or see. Maybe they can hear, I don't know, I don't remember quite, but they have this extra sense that they have that humanoids don't have.
I think it's said that it makes them very good navigators.
Yeah, basically. That's how the day saved, because they're good navigators.
Yeah, very interesting. Oh, well, we're matching on sort of our types of most alien aliens and rankings so far. That's cool.
Yeah. Let's see if this keeps up.
So what's your number 3 then?
My number 3 is the giant amoeba of the
immunity syndrome?
The immunity syndrome, yes. Basically, it's a giant amoeba. It's being so large, it can consume planets and spaceships. We don't know actually if it's really sentient or not. I think it kind of is. It was hinted to be this, and it's like nothing we've ever seen before or since. Basically, being like this.
Oh, the space amoeba.
The space amoeba.
We must be brain twins, because my next pick was what I called from a space cloud category.
Oh.
And it wasn't the space amoeba, but the space amoeba was definitely in that category. I mean, the thing about the space amoeba is they encounter it, they're at risk, and they really want to study it, but they never really understand what it is. I mean, sure, they throw out some theories. It's like a huge mitochondria or something, but at the end of the day, they're concerned with one, making sure that they live. And so, really, the scientific explanation of what the space amoeba is never really coalesces to something that we understand fully.
That's true, but I would like to say I like the space amoeba more than the cloud, the the cloud beings. I guess you can call those creatures, because it's not a cloud. It's substantial. It's you can touch it. They can touch it. They can see it. It's a being. It's a cell. It's just a huge organism. It's not gaseous, however you say that.
Yeah, you're very correct. So
Yeah.
there's definitely some other space clouds. In this category, I kind of had like the the anger sucking one from Day of the Dove,
Yeah.
um, the very vampiric one from Obsession
Yeah.
that Kirk was had some grievances against. There's even really kind of like this weird being that sort of poses as Jack the Ripper in Wolf the Fold. We don't
Yeah.
quite understand that. But my pick for number 3 was the companion.
Oh, yeah. I imagine. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
probably the space cloud that got the most. I guess not exactly the most attention. Just it got the most opinions. It got the most talking to.
Exactly. So the companion is a gaseous type entity, but it actually has quite a number of abilities. It's not just able to um, sort of telepathically or empathetically communicate with other life forms. It actually can travel into space off a planet very quickly. It produces a lot of energy. I think it's described as being composed of like some ionized hydrogen and electricity. And because of that, it can actually attack people with electricity. So it can produce materials like material objects like food and water, and then probably even stranger, it can actually heal
Yeah.
humanoids, heal people, and then essentially merge with them to become a more corporal form. So the companion is, I sort of say, like your ultimate non-corporal entity that that unlike the space amoeba, which just kind of like goes through space and just feeds off of energy, the companion is very much more presented more like a
Okay.
person,
Yeah.
right? It has some personality, it has feelings, it wants to know what love is. All it lacks is a body,
Yeah.
essentially. For me, the companion sort of won in my space cloud category. For just wanting to be more human, and essentially falling in love with someone.
Yeah.
It's very different. But we
Different.
have no real idea. The companion, I guess, is supposed to be sort of a species unto itself. It seems to be a loner. We don't ever see any other type of companion esque beings around. It really is sort of like a one of a kind,
It
just
is.
like the space amoeba.
Yeah. And but the thing is, I think by the dialogue of the companion, it seems like it, itself, he doesn't know if there are others like him,
Right.
like her, I guess, because
Him or her or it, yes.
yeah, they say that she's a female, but it was the 60s. You can't have something that's not female falling in love with
Hmm.
male. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, I get why you picked. It was one of my runner-ups, that and the aliens from Catspaw, because yeah, it is a very interesting life form. Um, like you said, the gaseous form that got the most like opinions. Like it got to talk. It got to actually have feelings and emotions and a personality.
Yeah, it wasn't just the danger of the episode. Do you know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah,
yes, it essentially pulls them to the planet and attacks them at some point, but it does it with a purpose, and they eventually realize that it is a essentially capable of thought, capable of feeling. Um,
yeah,
yeah, it's a conscious being that it has a lot of power.
yeah. It's a very interesting area.
Yeah, we're on track so far. This is good.
Yeah, I think I know what your number one is, and I think that's my number two.
Oh, really? Well,
I
go
mean,
ahead. What is your number
and-
two?
it's everybody's favorite alien from the original series. It's the Horta.
Yes, the Horta.
The Horta.
The Horta is my number one, so tell us all about it.
Yeah. Well, it's the Horta. It's a silicon-based platform. The first one, the human supposedly meets. Um, it's presented as a monster, but then they get to talk to it telepathically. And it's a mother. It has babies. It has eggs that will hatch into babies. Um, it's a cute little pizza monster, and it rocks.
It
Yeah,
basically feeds off of the planet itself, and it does that. It basically, as it creates tunnels, it's feeding. It's very interesting.
yeah, it is. The way it moves around, the way it looks, everything about it is alien, but also, they can communicate with it. It's not evil. It's not just, like the clouding obsession. It's not just out to get them. It's not even like just doing its thing and kind of people get in the way because it just doesn't notice them. No, like the Horta is on the same level as humans as far as intelligence is concerned, but it's it's different. It's very, very different.
It's also very long lived.
Yeah, that's true.
So it just the way it has it, its lifespan is like something like 50,000 years, and it's almost like the race goes through sort of a cycle where they all die out except for one, and then the mother Horta takes care of the eggs, and then they all are hatch, and the race
Continue. Yeah.
continues. So I think one of my favorite moments in the episode is in the very beginning where Spock sort of uses his tricorder to determine that it's silicon based life form, and he just sounds excited about that. Like, this is something we've never heard of before.
Exactly. So what was your number two?
Well, my number two. So one, the Horta was all by itself in its own category because there's not a lot of non-carbon based life forms in the original series. I mean, there could be, but they're not very specific about it.
Yeah.
The Horta is one of the examples where they're like, this is definitely not something whose biology is like ours. That really was in its own category, and that's why it was my number one. But my number two is, you're probably going to laugh at this.
Maybe.
It's the salt monster from M113.
Yeah, the salt monster.
So, first off, let me just say that the salt monster is now extinct.
Yeah, that's true.
What happens is, and this is from the Man Trap, they basically encounter the last of a kind of species that, instead of requiring like water to live in the way that humans do, it requires salt to live, and therefore it is sort of designed to be able to intake salt through like these suckers on its fingers. And but the thing about the salt monster is it's designed very much like a horror movie monster.
It is. It really is.
And for me, that just kind of sets it apart from other like aliens, because this one's very stylistic in a sense that uh, if you've been watching like horror movies in the 60s, like they make monsters. They're supposed to look grotesque and creepy, not something you want to see crawling out of the shadows in the middle of the night. And so they don't hold back when they sort of design the look of the salt monster, right? It's kind of like the swamp thing crawls out of the swamp. It's got stringy hair and a
leech-like mouth.
Yeah, with fangs but the thing about it is the way it looks is only revealed once they figure out that this Nancy Carter is in fact not Nancy Carter, because it also has the ability telepathically project an image of what it wants you to see so that you don't know what it looks like.
I think it's also the only monster or being that has telepathic abilities that are specific to each person. Like it projects to each person is what they want to see.
Exactly. So it's above and beyond your regular horror movie monster. It's the kind that could be standing next to you and you would never know it, as long as it didn't want you to. And
Exactly.
It's not manipulating like energy or matter or, everybody sees the same thing. Like you said, it gets into your mind and sort of says, oh, this is who I am. And therefore that's what you think it is. Which makes it all the more scary when its true form is revealed.
Yeah, that's true. Also, the salt monster, it kind of makes you think why it had to develop this telepathic abilities. It doesn't seem like the planet they were on was full of intelligent beings that needs to fool. So what's the story here, basically?
I know, and we don't really know. Like it's sort of like a chameleon.
Yeah.
Right, and like you said, it probably developed that in order to survive in its environment. But at the same time, why did it need to hide its true form in order to survive? I mean, we obviously know that when it's aboard a spaceship, when it's trying to suck the salt out of humans, that they're not just going to readily give up. I mean, it has a purpose to do that, but. Usually chameleons usually they're either predator or prey, right? So they're trying to disguise themselves in order to catch prey in the way that it was on the ship. But at the same time, it could also be trying to hide from something in its environment. But we never really get that answer because it is the last of its kind.
Exactly.
So, and then I think one other thing I'll mention about it, it's actually stronger than a Vulcan.
It is.
So it's not like it necessarily has to be a chameleon because it's weak in the way that Sylvia and Karab needed, were very fragile beings and needed to hide who they were so they didn't get stepped on.
Yeah.
But, this one is actually it's got all your qualities of a good horror movie monster. It's terrifying appearance. It's super strong. It is sort of like a vampire, sucks the salt right out of you. It gets into your mind.
The fact they're stronger than the Vulcans kind of also makes you think maybe they are actually weak compared to the other creatures that lived on that world. When we see that world, it looks kind of desert-like, barren, and there's nothing there basically. So
it made me wonder if that was because the planet had lost its supply of salt, which caused the extinction of the creature's race.
Maybe.
Maybe it had gone through some type of change and it was ravaged.
That's possible, yeah. And yeah, it is very intriguing that we never really found any answer to that. No, it's the best of its kind.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I picked it for number 2. I mean, it's got very interesting qualities. Comes from a sort of a now extinct civilization, but also just because they totally went the horror movie route.
Yeah.
With true. That appearance.
It really is one of the most creative designs in the whole show, that and the Cat's-Paw aliens, like we said before.
Yeah. So that's interesting. You know what my number 1 is?
Yeah, and you know what my number 1 is.
Well, you did mention a few that that almost made your list. Did you have another one you wanted to share?
Basically, you mentioned them all: the salt monster, the cloud for metamorphosis, the companion, as you call them, and the aliens from Casper. That's the thing. The original series didn't have that many aliens. A lot of them were really just like human looking and human behaving, basically.
I think the only other one that stood out for me, Soda, was the parasites from Operation Annihilate.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, we essentially find out that these parasites that are sort of attached to people and become like use them like hosts in order to collectively accomplish an objective. They're actually more like a hive mind type, but they're also compared to like cells of a giant organism, right? Like brain cells, but they all sort of individually operate, but with a single objective, and that objective, of course, is to go from planet to planet to travel through the galaxy and essentially drive people mad through pain in order to accomplish that. It's just very strange because they look like little like plastic pancakes. I mean, it really is sort of like, you have an invasion essentially of some weird creature, but it turns out it's not like the single creatures themselves you need to be worried about. It's them, like what they are as a whole and what they're trying to accomplish.
I didn't include them because we don't know that much about them as creatures. I think that's also why I didn't include the salt monster, because they are aliens, but I'm not so sure they're intelligent. They're more like animals, basically.
Yeah.
Well, there is also the Gorn.
Yeah, the Gorn was on my list.
He does act like he does act human-like.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Design, I mean, the Gorn is very iconic.
I did have like another one in my sort of like animal-ish species, and that was the Tribbles.
So yeah.
I mean, everybody knows about the Tribbles. They're little cute fur balls that procreate like crazy. Just feed them a little bit and then you'll have like 100. There were a couple of other strange species that we didn't really like get to know much about. So like the Tholians and like the Medusans, there's the Zatarans who are sort of like non-corporal beings. The last again, like the last survivors of their kind looking for host.
I have to say they kind of have like probably the most boring episode of
I know. There's like the weird disembodied brains that like that like the gladiatorial games.
I kind of thought about them, but they act kind of like humans. That's why I didn't put them in.
Yeah.
But like their design is very creepy and cool.
And then the only other one that I thought of that sort of was in like came close to the salt monster, but clearly was above and beyond the salt monster as a being, were I guess the Melictations. I'm not sure how you pronounce that, from Spectre of the Gun. So you don't really see them until the end, when you just get like this real blurry vision of kind of looks like Slimer from Ghostbusters. It's got like glowing eyes and looks like a brain floating in space. It's very ill defined. It's very creepy looking. It looks like it definitely would be something out of a horror movie. So it kind of made me think that they just like slapped something together in the prop room and said, let's just put some lights around it. And this is the species that captured the crew, made them reenact the Old West. So they didn't win. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, if we're just looking at like races, highly intelligent races, I think you and I covered most of them from like an alien, very alienish perspective.
Oh, there is another one in the kind of the beast kind of category. The monkey-like creature that attacked the woman in the the episode where it was kind of a Vietnam War allegory.
Oh yeah.
Episode names today, I don't know.
Are you talking about A Private Little War?
Yeah, the Private Little War, the monkey that attacked.
Yeah, the Mugato or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Again, that's like more animal.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're talking animals, unicorn dog. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Unicorn dog.
Oh, goodness. However, we don't really have that many limitations when it comes to the animated series, right, Soda?
That's true. That's very true. We have a lot of other limitations, but design is not one of them.
Let's segue into our top 3 from the animated series.
Just before that, I'm curious. Did you watch the entire animated series for this?
I watched all but like 3 episodes.
Okay, that's not an easy task. It's not easy to sit and watch them all at once.
It was some midnight watching going on. Like
right.
I had my snacks and and I had I had it on and I just let it play. I mean, the episodes are very short.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, sometimes they're not even fully realized as episodes. So, but yes, I did venture into watching I'd say 80% of the animated series. I actually kind of targeted the episodes that I thought would be the most interesting. And I had already seen a couple anyway, so something about the animated series, I mean, we were just talking about this. From a design perspective, they're definitely not limited in how they draw the new and interesting alien species.
Yeah.
We do see some more humanoid-like ones. To your point, we see some that look nothing like humans, even if they're bipedal, but they act very much like humans.
Yeah.
So, like you, I sort of dismiss those because if they didn't stand out to me and didn't have like this interesting like biology or some weird like limbs or something like that, I just said you're not going to make the cut. What about you?
I didn't dismiss all the bipedal species. I mean, the thing about it is in the original series, when you have a bipedal species, it's usually just like a human with a costume.
Yeah.
But in the animated series, the bipedal species can look like pretty much anything, from a bird to a cat to pretty much anything, to something that's completely unidentified, even though it stands on 2 legs.
Yeah.
I look so. If the design was far enough from a human, it kind of passed my marker of that looks alien enough, and I basically judge them by how weird their culture is, how different it is, and how interested I was in it.
Mm-hmm. Like we've been saying, I sort of dismissed the ones that were acted very human and seemed just like they didn't have anything special about them. But I didn't entirely dismiss all the bipedals. Actually, my number 3 is a bipedal.
So what is it?
It is Commander Bem.
Oh.
From the episode Bem. Commander Bem is a Pandronian, and the Pandronians are a relatively new race inducted into the Federation. And Commander Bem he's been allowed to join the Enterprise crew to observe how Federation and how Starfleet operate. So at first glance, it just seems like Bem is very arrogant and he's very judgmental. And Kirk makes a point of saying, "We've invited you down to these away missions. You haven't come on any of them because you've just been keeping to your quarters. And why is it that you want to come down on the one landing, one away mission that is the most dangerous?" But he's just like, oh, it's not for you to decide. I'm going to come down and observe, and you can't stop me. So he's actually kind of childlike in his, I will say, in his arrogance and his pride. But really, what set him apart from just being another childlike humanoid is that he has something called a colony body. And it's actually the most disturbing thing because at some point in the episode, or actually the moment that they beam down to the planet, you see that he's actually trying to be a little bit deceitful. He switches out the communicators and the phasers for fake ones, but he does it by by essentially like disassembling his lower half. And his lower half, so his torso detaches from the bottom half of his body, and little arms with hand like fingers come out, and incognito switch out the phasers and the communicators. And the first time I saw that, I thought this one can make my list.
Yeah, Pandorians basically are my number two because it's such a weird, unexplained concept. Like, his legs start walking around, and like it's not like the torso just falls to the floor; it keeps floating there.
And that's the other thing, right? Like this colony creature, which I guess is supposed to mean he's made up of like little creatures. Like
Yeah.
little, I'm not even sure I understand the science behind it, but all I know is when his head comes off, I was
Yeah.
just like, whoa, you are alien. Because he has to get through some like rainforest, like by like his arm comes off, his head comes off, his torso comes off, like just floating by. And then he reassembles himself. Easy
Yeah.
peasy.
So yeah, that's very very unique and very weird. Like that's the funny thing. His design is not that weird. Like he's bipedal, like you said. He's kind of green, like looks like a cross between a lizard and a lion, basically.
And he calls himself, like, when he's actually finally ashamed of acting out, of basically putting the crew in danger and being too judgmental, he calls himself an eggling.
Yeah.
So, there's some insinuation there that maybe they're hatched from eggs. But obviously, he comes from a very immature race. Doesn't know or care about holding up the Prime Directive.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very different concept, and that's why he's my number two.
Right. And even when he talks about punishment and he talks about disassembling himself, he says unity must cease to exist. Like, just some of the terms that he uses are very, very strange. I guess it goes in with being the colony creature.
Yeah. Yeah.
If the Pandronians are your number two, then what was your number three?
My number three were the Lectran. I'm not sure I pronounced this correctly. The Lectran, which are those giant pink slugs that take humans and put them in zoos. Yeah. So yeah, they really are just giant pink red slugs, and apparently they are extremely intelligent, like so intelligent that they Spock can't even communicate with them telepathically because their thought process is so superior and quick. The Lectrans took one crew of a starship of the Federation, put them in zoo, partly because humans are not as advanced as them. They just see them as like some sort of animal, I guess.
Right,
And
because they're so inferior to how evolved the species is.
exactly.
Yeah.
And when the Enterprise comes by, because the other crew sent a distress signal, they capture Spock and Kirk and McCoy and put them in the zoo exhibit too. They're not exactly. I mean, they kind of seem like they are arrogant, but by the end of the episode, it kind of makes clear that like they have a reason to be because they're just that advanced and powerful and I guess intelligent. And eventually they kind of do realize that humans are not animals; they are people, just very advanced people. So they let them go and tell them to come back in like 20 or 30 centuries when they advance more.
It's so funny. The Lactrans are my number one.
Interesting.
Simply because they look like slugs with elephant trunks. So they look like an animal, but they essentially are nothing like an animal that's not highly intelligent. In fact, they're so
Yeah.
intelligent, like you said, that Spock just goes, I can't even talk to them, and I think they're laughing at me.
Exactly.
And then Scotty's like, oh, this wee one here is 6 years old, equivalent, but his IQ is in the thousands. Oh, and, their ability to manipulate the ship. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just amazing. Like, their powers are almost undefinable because they're so advanced.
And they also think humans are ugly.
Oh, well, yes, that too. I mean, we've seen a lot of telepathic races in the original series and the animated series, but I don't think we've ever seen a telepathic race that is so beyond reach. I mean,
Exactly.
who even knows what their tens of thousands of centuries that took them to evolve, like in their centuries, right? Who even knows how long that is?
Yeah.
So, but I guess they amuse themselves by just having pets.
I guess.
It's very strange.
Well, so you know my number two. What is your number two
My number two are the Vendorians.
story?
We only meet one, and it's in the episode The Survivor, where they pick up what they think is a philanthropist named Carter Winston, who's been missing for about 5 years. And it turns out that this Carter Winston is not actually Carter Winston. He's a Vendorian who's been shape-shifting to look like Carter. Vendorians are described as really crafty, very deceitful. So it really doesn't surprise, I think, Kirk or anyone that somehow they've got a Vendorian on board who's basically like trying to infiltrate them and poses someone who's been missing for a long time. I think he even mentions that their planet is sort of off limits to the Federation simply because they are such a race of deceitful beings. But what I find really interesting about the Vendorians is it's not just their appearance and their what they look like in their true form, right? So when they're not shape shifting, their actual form looks sort of like a cephalopod. um, they have like really long, like a real bulbous head, like no torso, really long tentacle arms that they kind of like run on.
Yeah.
But it's their shape shifting ability that really made them stand out to me because we do see some shape shifting with other races, but I've never seen ones that turn into inanimate objects. So he like shapeshifts into a biobed. At one point, he shapeshifts into a deflector shield outside the ship to protect them from attack by the Romulans. And then you learn basically that this particular Vendorian came across the actual Carter Winston when he was like I guess wrecked on the planet. Carter, of course, was dying, but somehow the Vendorian absorbed some of who Carter was. And so that's how he was able to like infiltrate the Enterprise as this person because he knows what Carter's thoughts were like, how he acted, what he felt. In fact, he even knew that he was in love with his fiancée who he left behind 5 years ago. He merges with him in such a way that the Vendorian actually considers himself to be like Carter, who is in love with his fiancée. It's not just like they take on the form of another object or another being, but they also have the ability to become them.
Okay.
But both inanimate and animate. So it's the weirdest thing.
That's true. I guess in this regard, I was kind of, I guess, biased because we do see shapeshifters even outside in the original series, in the sixth movie, for example, and then we have the entire changeling race in Deep Space Nine. So I was like, okay, shapeshifters, we've seen this before.
Yeah.
I'm guessing in the 70s, if I were watching the animated series in the 70s, it would be kind of newer to me. But that's why I said I came in with kind of a bias. It didn't include it. It didn't really come up to me because behavior-wise, besides shapeshifting, they are kind of human-like, I guess, to me. They don't look human. They have very crazy, creepy, nice design in their original form, but they seem, they talk like humans. They act like humans. The particular one we see in the episode even says that he's like on his planet he's considered a nobody, which is why he did what he did.
Yeah.
That just kind of seemed to me like a very human-like society. So
For me, it's the strange ability to shapeshift and like merge into the being that they're shapeshifting into that really put them up on my 2 on my list. So
yeah. I can see why though. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, because it was spoiled in Deep Space Nine, changelings can shapeshift into fire. So it's like, yeah, you can.
Yep.
Yeah. My number 2, you already know the Pandorians, with them specifically in mind because of their very weird colony bodies. Yes. My number 1 was the Philosians.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, the Philosians are, well, we see them in the episode that is most well known for, the one that gave us the giant Spock clone.
Yeah.
But it happens on the planet Philos, and the Philosians are its inhabitants. They are plant people, which is something I don't think we've ever seen before, or again since. They do look kind of like grass, I guess, like they're covered in grass, kind of. They have like 4 legs and more than 7 arms, and their eyes are these little red vine tentacles. They look very, very weird. And basically, they're plants. That's what they are. They don't hide it. We can see that they live for a very, very long time, and they can grow to incredible sizes, like huge. We see huge, basically bodies of dead Philosians. Because their entire species, not the entire species, but most of the species was killed by a bacteria carried by a human that came to their planet.
Yeah.
They're just very, very strange. They're actually kind of nice. They wanted to spread peace across the universe or something like that before their entire species was kind of killed by this bacteria.
The Philosians are my honorable mention. So it was really between like them and Commander Bem. They're fairly interesting. Something like they've developed 70% of their brain, but even the fact that they were plant life that has a brain, it's very interesting. But at the same time, they're sort of reminiscent of, I guess, what you might assume plant-like beings should act like. They're very passive, very peaceful. Kind of reminds me of like, the Ents in Lord of the Rings. I suppose when I was thinking through many of the different species, like you said, there's a lot of humanoid-like, but then they're kind of tailored to maybe an animal species. So you have like an Avon race, like the Score. You have like the cat, the felinoid races. You see several of those. You have ones that are like the Aquans, who are like water, like fish. Like, come on.
Yeah, those are my honorable mention too, the Aquans, because an underwater species. That's pretty cool.
So, I mean, I sort of looked at it as if like taking concepts of things that, like animal species that are not as we don't consider as highly intelligent as we are, and then elevating them to a highly intelligent, advanced race. So for me, the Philosians kind of fit in that category. Yeah. So like something we wouldn't expect to be intelligent at all, a plant, is then elevated to a plant species that is more intelligent than the average humanoid race.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
It's
can see where you're
interesting.
coming from. Yeah, I just thought, like, like you said, we take
I like them.
animals, but I like television. Yeah, they're very interesting. I would like to see, like, plant-based life forms in live-action series. I wonder how if they can do that. That should be interesting. Like you said, you mentioned, like, the feline species. The Xinti are also one of my, like, honorable mentions. They do kind of act humany, I guess.
Yeah.
But their design is very interesting, and their culture is also kind of like intriguing because I get a feeling that they were set up as some sort of long-term villain, but just never came to fruition because the show kind of petered out, and they didn't have the budget to do them in live action.
Oh yeah. We're talking about the ones who like tried to go to war with the Federation several times.
And the giant like tigers with the pink uniform.
Yeah, so they're very like warlike, kind of like a pirate race. Very
Yeah,
aggressive. Yeah.
very aggressive. Yeah, they have this like internal hatred of every species that doesn't eat meat.
Tell us a little more about the Aquans that were your honorable mention.
Well, the Aquans are they're basically a mermaid race, I guess. They're underwater race. The interesting part is that they didn't always were underwater. They started out as an air-breathing species, and then when their world became like flooded, they found some way to turn themselves into water breathers, and for some reason it became like genetic, even though it originally wasn't. Um, and I think the interesting part is not even seeing the society underwater, because I think if you kind of look at any movie or TV show that has a species of underwater creatures, they're kind of similar in this sense.
Mm-hmm.
But the interesting part is like the division between their past as an air breathers and their current situation as water breathers, because they kind of at the beginning of the episode they don't kind of know of their past, and they have to be reminded because they have this like fear and mistrust of air breathers, and they forgot they used to be one of themselves.
They are a very interesting race, for sure.
What do you think about the Megastu? I didn't want to include them. They're not actually aliens. They're just
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. They're not exactly aliens.
yeah. The the episode was just so weird and just unrelated to anything in the show. It wasn't even like science fiction. It was kind of
To be honest, I'm like you. I thought the whole episode was kind of weird with the oh we came and but then we got persecuted, and uh, we just came from another dimension, and I don't know. I think the whole dimension thing like kind of went okay. So you don't even belong here.
I mean, there's also the backwards dimension in the last episode, which was interesting.
We kind of mentioned like most of the ones that I had on my list. I mean, obviously there are some very humanoid-like ones, even though like like the bird race, the
Score.
yeah, the score.
The more Griffins, right?
Yeah, we have like the Cations, like the Maress is from.
The thing is about all those species in the animated series that characters, I guess, but we don't know a lot about them unless the episode is about them.
Right.
So if we know about the Xinti or the Lectrans or the Philosians, because the episode was about them, but like we don't know really much about the Cations or Eric species. What was the species ever called if it had a name?
I don't think it did.
Yeah, it was never named, I guess. So yeah.
It definitely had some like interesting animals. For instance, in like the Eye of the Beholder with the Lactrans right in the zoo, there. My favorite part is when a dinosaur falls on McCoy. I mean, I was just like, oh my god, is he stuck under a dinosaur?
Or like, you know, the we talked about how we never saw anything like the Horta, but they had like these giant rock monsters at the Love Potion episode.
Yeah.
That for some reason the Love Potion worked on the rock monsters. So who knows what was in this thing?
Yeah, and then like the sea dragon type thing, the dinosaur. There were the flying dragons that
Yeah,
Kirk was like, "Oh, if we just shoot them with our phasers." I mean, they definitely had the liberty to make a lot of interesting more animal species. Yeah,
exactly.
in all the episodes really.
Yeah,
That's all I had for you. We're actually pretty aligned on most of our choices. If not, the same race, similar one.
yeah, exactly. Especially in the original series choices. Because I think, like you said, you categorize them. They had very defined categories, and I think we kind of agreed instinctually on what category is more alien and what is less.
Yep. I don't think I realized how many space clouds there were, or like space entities or non corporeal beings there were just in the original series episodes. There's a number of them.
Yeah, it's true. There really are a lot of them.
And then there's only a few that are really like full on costume types, like the Gorn and the Salt Monster and
The whole
the
time. Yeah.
Horta.
I mean, I guess being making a costume and paying someone to be in it is more expensive than just adding colored gas to the picture.
Well, this has been a very fun review. I liked all your choices.
Me too. Yeah, it was kind of nice to like refresh your memory. There are some aliens that kind of escaped my memory, like you said. I didn't realize how many cloud beings were there, but yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. And there were some I didn't even think like warranted mentioning, like the Vians and the Telosians, just like, oh, we're super powerful aliens, but we have no compassion for anybody. We're evil.
Yeah,
Or not necessarily evil, but they're just very
self-centered.
self-centered. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this was our episode. Thank you everybody for joining us and listening, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.
Bye.